Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the downfall. To start this list off, let's talk about one of the things that happened just before the transition into the first intermediate period of ancient Egypt. It is important to note some of the causes of the fall of the Old Kingdom, which is what brought forth this period of chaos and turmoil. One reason that is often cited is the extremely long reign of Pepe II, who was the last pharaoh of the 6th dynasty. His reign began while he was a child, and it is believed that he lived to possibly into his 90s, which, like, first of all, that's incredible. Imagine that guy with modern medicine and plumbing. I'm just saying. But, of course, while that's wild to see that long of a reign, especially back in those times, his lengthy life proved to cause some issues for succession because the guy outlived all of his heirs. Because of this sort of disorganization, it led to the regime of the Old Kingdom kind of being disintegrated. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Nile. The overflowing of the Nile was a very important time for ancient Egyptians. It is a super important cycle for them that was actually celebrated annually for 2 weeks. In the intermediate period, it is thought that the overflowing of the Nile, which really was necessary to their way of life, was lessened, or it may have potentially been non-existent for a period due to a drier climate, which is said to have potentially led ancient Egypt and its citizens into a terrible famine. The drier climate and the lack of the Nile inundation would have resulted in lower crop yields, which would have a significant impact on those living in the area at the time. In our number 8 spot today, we have disorganization. Like I kind of mentioned in the first point, part of the reason this intermediate period is often referred to as the Dark Ages is due to the lack of organization within the kingdom. Manetho, who is a historian and priest from the Ptolemaic era, would describe 70 kings who ruled in 70 days. This is likely a bit sarcastic and an exaggeration, but it's meant to show how chaotic things were at the time in terms of leadership. This period of time can sometimes be overlooked in terms of leadership because there is very little known about who was actually leading during this time. It is possible that the 7th dynasty may have been more of an oligarchy, which would have likely been composed of officials of the 6th dynasty. There unfortunately is very little in terms of both textual as well as architectural evidence that survived this period, so much of what really went on remains a secret. In our number 7 spot today, we have artifacts. During the time of the 7th and 8th dynasty, while it is true that we have little to go on, there have been a few interesting artifacts found that are believed to belong to this time period. There have been scarabs that have been found that are believed to have belonged to Neferker II of the 7th dynasty. There was also a green jasper cylinder that is believed to have come from the 8th dynasty. There was even a small pyramid that was constructed by King Ebi of the 8th dynasty that has been identified at Saqqara. While we have found these things, there are some rulers from this time whose positions remain unknown to this day. It is entirely possible that we may never know where some of these rulers lie. In our number 6 spot today, we have literature. While this entire period of time is incredibly interesting, one super cool thing is that the emergence of what is considered literature by our more modern standards seems to have occurred during this period of time. This led to the birth of new literary prowess in the Middle Kingdom, the age that came after this period. There is one specific piece that is very important historically, and that is the Ipuwer Papyrus. Although this piece of literature is not dated to this period, it is widely believed that it is likely referring to this intermediate period, and it records the decline in both international relations as well as just the general impoverishment that was seen in ancient Egypt at the time. In our number 5 spot today, we have nomarchs. Another problem that really contributed to the fall of the Old Kingdom and the introduction into this more difficult period of time was the rise in power of provincial nomarchs. A nomarch was a provincial governor in ancient Egypt. Since the country was divided into 42 different provinces, which were called nomes, there would be a government official that was responsible for each one. Nearing the beginning of the first intermediate period, the position of nomarch had become a hereditary one, which of course meant that one family was likely to hold the position and the power for quite some time. This of course meant that these families, with every year, would only get more powerful and more influential within their nome, which left them becoming more independent from their overall ruler. power. These nomarchs were beginning to have their own tombs built, and they began putting together their own armies, and of course, this went on to create conflict with those surrounding them. This not only created tensions, but it created warfare. In our number 4 spot today we have division. Once things kind of settled from the chaos of the fall of the Old Kingdom and the bizarrities of the 7th and 8th dynasties, it was realized that Egypt was now kind of divided when it came to ruling, as there were two competing power bases. One of those bases was at Heracleopolis, which was located in Lower Egypt, and the other was at Thebes in Upper Egypt. Those in Lower Egypt had their rule for approximately 94 years, and their kings comprised the 9th and 10th dynasties, each with 19 rulers. The founder of the 9th dynasty, Kheti I, is often described as quite an evil and violent ruler who caused a lot of harm to those living in Egypt at the time. It is said that he was, quote, seized with madness, which I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it is likely hinting towards some sort of mental health issue. In the end, it is said that he met his demise at the hands of a crocodile, which, I mean, leaves me with a lot of questions. In our number 3 spot today we have the buffer zone. Within the Heracleopolitan kingdom there was a powerful and wealthy province of Siut, or Asiut, which really rose to prominence during this otherwise difficult time. A new line of nomarchs began to rise out of this area, and they maintained quite a close relationship with the kings of Lower Egypt. We were able to discover this through what was inscribed on their tombs. These inscriptions provided a look into what the political situations were like during their reigns, and it describes this line of nomarchs as digging canals, reducing taxation, reaping rich harvests, raising cattle herds, and maintaining an army and fleet. Again, we are talking about a time that is referred to as the Dark Ages, so this sort of success was a big deal. Despite this thriving political situation, the Siut province acted as a sort of buffer zone between the dueling Upper and Lower Egypt, which means that it also bore a lot of the brunt of the attacks that were coming down to Lower Egypt from Thebes. In our number 2 spot today we have the Upper Egypt rulers. We spoke briefly about those who were ruling Lower Egypt at the time, so what about Upper Egypt? Well, the Theban kings are said to have been descendants of Intef, who is the nomarch of Thebes, often referred to as the keeper of the door to the south. Intef is often credited with organizing Upper Egypt into the independent ruling body from the south that it went on to become, but despite this it doesn't appear as though he ever tried to claim the title of king himself. Intef II began the attack of northern Egypt, and his successor Intef III completed that attack, which then left him to begin the move into Middle Egypt and the attack on Lower Egypt. The first 3 kings of the 11th dynasty, all named Intef, would also become the last 3 kings of the first intermediate period. In our number 1 spot today we have the Middle Kingdom. With all of the political chaos that was going on and with the competition for power, this resulted in a lot of violence. Prior to the military conflict, it is said that temples were pillaged, artwork was vandalized, and statues of different kings were destroyed. After the reign of the Intefs, they were succeeded by a line of kings who were called Mentuhotep. The second in this line is the ruler who would go on to eventually defeat the kings and rulers of Lower Egypt, those in the Heracleopolitan kingdom. This is important because it marked a new shift in ancient Egypt. This defeat marked the unification of the country, the continuation of the 11th dynasty, and it brought Egypt into the time of the Middle Kingdom.
In our number 10 spot we have the black helicopters. Apparently outside of Area 51, people have spotted black helicopters fly in and out of the area. It is said that this is the home to the government's secret helicopters. Dating all the way back to the 1970s, people have reported seeing these black helicopters. There were rumors that they were to do with cattle mutilation, toxic chemical releases over neighborhoods. But most people seem to believe that those are just stories to cover up what they're really doing, flying the reptilian leaders in and out, let's be real. In our number 9 spot, we have studying the spacecraft. There have been a few whistleblowers that have worked at Area 51, and these people have stated that the engineers that are working in the testing area are actually reverse engineering alien spaceships. We can assume they are doing this to figure out how the aliens made these shapes and how they fly so fast. Man, that's so trippy. As far back as the 1950s, people have reported seeing unidentified flying objects at the Southern Nevada military base. One of the whistleblowers, named Bob Lazar, has spoken out about this, and apparently while working in Area 51, he saw flying saucers that were powered by an element called 115. And that was years before that element was recorded as found by humans. Imagine working on an alien spaceship and coming across a whole new metal that's not from this planet. And I'm sure they've discovered things that I wouldn't even be able to dream about in my wildest dreams. In our number 8 spot, we have aliens. Okay, so there is no photographic evidence for this claim, but there have been whistleblowers that have said this to be true. Honestly though, anyone else thinking what I'm thinking? Are the aliens being held hostage? Or are we being held hostage? Let's be real. Most likely they're controlling us, or the aliens are being held hostage by the reptile people that are already here and running mankind. That's it. I'm out. Apparently though, Bob Lazar has said that he walked down a hallway at S4 in Area 51 and he saw a small gray extraterrestrial between two men in lab coats through a small window. Apparently he was told by a guard to stop looking and, move along. There have been other sightings of gray creatures in other secret military bases, such as the one in Dulce, New Mexico in 1979 by a man by the name of Philip Schneider. So, I believe that Bob is telling the truth. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. In our number 7 spot, we have weather control. I've heard about this for quite some time, and I truly feel like if there's something that I could fully get on board with and believe right away, it's the idea that the government controls the weather. Hear me out. First off, being able to do that would be extremely valuable, and honestly, it could make you potentially threatening to your competitors. Don't mess with me, otherwise I will make sure it rains on your country for a full month and all of your crops will suffer. Watch, wars in the future will just be governments messing with each other's weather. That would be wild. If we can make objects fly, if we can send messages through empty space through a phenomena that we call the internet, we call Wi-Fi, we could definitely create a few clouds every now and then. We do have proof though that the government has done research projects to modify clouds in the past, but who knows if there was a conclusion to this experiment, let alone if this experiment took place in Area 51. In our number 6 spot, we have the CIA filings. Apparently, up until 2013, we had no idea that Area 51 even officially existed. In 2005, the National Security Archive at George Washington University filed a Freedom of Information Act about the U-2 spy plane program. And so, in 2013, the CIA was forced to declassify documents that related to Area 51. After this reveal, it became known that the military spent 20 years testing aerial surveillance programs called U-2 and Oxcart. And it also confirmed the existence of Area 51, which the locals would have been able to confirm regardless, but whatever. I could just imagine after the release of this information, all of the locals start connecting the dots about all the missing people in their area and blame it on the aliens. I would love to speak to some of the locals and see what they actually think and say. That would be fascinating. Anyways, they kept Area 51 a secret for so long that there must be a number of darker secrets within it that we don't know about. You can only assume. In our number 5 spot, we have the US military base. Author of Area 51, An Uncensored History of America's Top Secret Military Base by Annie Jacobson has been quoted as saying that yes, Area 51 is filled with secrets, but these secrets are around creating weapon systems and surveillance platforms that no one can think of, for the US military. Hence the reason it needs to remain a secret so they can one-up their opponent. Annie has gone on to say that if everyone could think of what they were doing, then they wouldn't be doing their job correctly. Apparently, Area 51 is the birthplace of what is called ISR intelligence. Why on earth would they not understand most earthly aircraft at this point in time in the world? They are working on reverse engineering alien spacecraft. I believe it. In our number 4 spot, we have secret disappearances. In the area of Area 51, there have been a lot of reportings of disappearances, some of young people and some are older. It has been reported that these disappearances are tied to Area 51, as some believe it's the aliens within the base that are taking these people. But most likely, the actual people of Area 51 are taking these people as test subjects, as there is no sign of them ever again after they disappear. That's what I think, at least. Where are they going to, and why is it so often within the vicinity of the base? Questions only the insiders would most likely know the answers to. In our number 3 spot, we have the Nevada Triangle phenomenon. A lot of people are very well aware of the Nevada Triangle phenomena, and we're pretty positive that the people of Area 51 would know the dark secrets around it. From Las Vegas to Reno, Reno to Fresno, and Fresno to Las Vegas, there have been many reports of unusual goings-on. Similar to the famous Bermuda Triangle, people disappear forever. Planes go missing, aliens have been spotted, claims of magical rocks, and so much more. The area and all its mysteriousness continues to be a complete mystery. Within the area is the Sierra Mountains, and if you have seen the new Jurassic Park movie, that is where they keep the major dinosaurs. I bet you the dinosaurs are just a front for the truth. That is where they keep the aliens, obviously. Coming up at our number 2 spot, we have portals to a new dimension. Along with the home base for the reptilian race, people believe that Area 51 actually holds the portal to another dimension, which honestly isn't too far-fetched when you hear about the reportings of the people that have gone near the area in the Sierra Mountains and have disappeared, only to have been teleported to a new area. Yep, these are real reportings from seemingly coherent people. The people inside the Area 51 base would know about this, and if strange things like this are happening in this area, then I bet you that it is not a coincidence that there's a secret government base right smack in the middle of it. Coincidence? I think not, sir. In our number 1 spot today, we have time travel. Along with the portal to another dimension theory, there is also a theory that the people of Area 51 are hiding a time travel machine. That's right. We know that scientists in testing facilities around the world have been playing with speeds that are too fast to imagine. So it is possible that something has been invented to travel time. A lot of people say, yes, this is probably possible, especially with the rise of people claiming that they have time traveled from the future. However, some of their claims have been inaccurate, such as, Donald Trump being the last US president, or that World War III would be in 2015. In any case, if there is a time travel machine, then Area 51 employees would possibly know about it. At least the higher-ups would, even if the employees didn't know what they were working on.
Number 10. The Altamura Cave Man. When researchers were exploring the cave of Lamalunga beneath the Italian town of Altamura, they were hoping to learn more about how the cave had been formed and its history. As they gazed around the limestone walls, their flashlights crossed a peculiar formation. It wasn't something normally formed in a cave, but appeared to be limestone nonetheless. Clambering over to investigate, these researchers soon realized that they were looking at no stone, no stalactite or gmite, but a skull. Indeed, this skull was ribbed with stony formations, the years of limestone dripping onto its face, allowing it to have the appearance of the surrounding walls. The body was investigated by more researchers and discovered to be a Neanderthal, the skeleton perfectly preserved by the cave's stagnant environment. How many visitors had visited this cave without knowing what secrets it held? Number 9. The Hubei Caves. We haven't crawled out of these caves yet, as our next stop on this ancient tour is Hubei, a province in China. When archaeologists explored a remote area near the Three Gorges Dam, they found a series of strange holes cut into a sheer wall of stone. Each hole was roughly cut, rectangular, and fairly deep. There's also the detail of the coffins that were sticking out of them. Yes, it seems that whoever built this ancient site did so with the intention of burying their dead inside inside of it. This correlates with theories of the time about how it was considered dangerous for people to bury their dead in the ground, for fear of animals stealing grandma for dinner. As a result, these coffins were designed to prevent animals from getting an easy meal, though it's unknown exactly how the coffins were carried to their locations. Carbon dating reveals that these burials were likely carried out by the Bo people, an ancient Chinese ethnic minority which was present during the Tang dynasty. Number 8. The Gaelic Tree Mystery. In 2015, harsh winds were responsible for uprooting a 200-year-old tree and a 1,000-year-old mystery. Located in Ireland, farmers were recovering from a recent windstorm when they went in to inspect the damages. It was likely a sobering sight to see a tree they might have known as a source of comfort or a location for friendly picnicking violently uprooted and slaughtered by the wind. What was then more immediately sobering was the skeleton found tangled in its roots. Hiring archaeologists, it was quickly revealed that the remains were of a young Gaelic man, roughly 1,000 years old. Despite his skeletal disposition, clear evidence of knife wounds were visible on his ribs and hand. Whether buried by his family or his murderer, none can say, and the case remains open to this day. Number 7. The Jigsaw Mummies. We're taking a much shorter trip around the world to Scotland, specifically southeast. This discovery honestly ought to be a fairly standard affair. Mummies and mummification have been widespread for an extremely long time. In general, mummies are mostly made through the dehydration of a corpse's flesh, which allows them to retain some of their appearance that they had in life. Bandages are not required. As a result, there are actually hundreds of mummies around the world, as depending on the environment of their burial, they could just accidentally end up that way. Egypt was the most famous for theirs because they were the first to dehydrate corpses on purpose, which is now wrong thanks to this discovery. As the mummies were investigated, it was revealed that they were deliberately mummified. Not only that, but more disturbingly, they weren't all the same. Analyzing the strange makeup of their body structure led researchers to realize that the mummies were actually constructed from multiple different bodies, each one using different parts. Number 6. The Hands of Egypt. On the topic of Egypt, which we briefly were, another secret was uncovered in the city of Avaris. Undertaking the excavation of the ancient and ominously named city, researchers discovered several pits in front of the palace, filled with 16 human hands. More interestingly, every single hand was a right hand. The reason for this is attributed to that hand having cultural significance within ancient Egyptian culture, where the removal of a hand from an enemy combatant would allow a soldier to prove their victory. They could then exchange the hand for gold. Whether or not the disarmed opponent was dead or alive was apparently left up to the victor, as lacking their left hand would forever prevent them from participating in conflicts ever again, and mark them as a failure. Number 5. The Leper Warriors. Found within an ancient Italian cemetery, the bones of a warrior revealed a startling reality of the ancient military orders of the time. Prior to the establishment of cities within the region, nomadic peoples found themselves in constant conflict. That, mixed with the issue of leprosy and the lack of medical capabilities to treat it, led to drastic solutions which hoped to solve the issue. Not by curing leprosy, but by ensuring its victims could go out swinging. Employing lepers as warriors, these soldiers raged their way through the battlefield. The idea of hesitation and out-of-style instinct when their life was already in the hands of God. One corpse from Campacharo even showed evidence of having survived a direct strike to the skull from an opponent's mace, and the after effects of ancient attempts at brain surgery. Pretty sick if you ask me. Number 4. Monk in a statue. While this image may have made its way around the internet, the story behind it certainly has not. When a trader of ancient Chinese relics sent his newly acquired golden statue of a sitting Buddha to an expert in order to restore it to its original splendor, they were shocked to discover that the statue contained a mummified corpse. When unwrapping this terrible gift, the name of the corpse was found to have been written on a bundle of cloth, dubbing the man as the monk Li Khan. This gave evidence to theories of how the process of self-mummification rose to popularity, where the living person would slowly poison themselves to make their body too toxic for even maggots to eat. Anyone who completed the ritual would be revered and worshipped, their body encased in gold. So then, how many more of these statues might be needing a little x-ray? Number 3. Vampire burials. Honestly, I just want this to be a cover for a metal album. When digging up a mass grave in Venice, of which there are probably thousands, one corpse stood out as slightly unusual to archaeologists. Buried with a massive chunk of stone in her mouth, the corpse was confirmed to have been buried around the time of the bubonic plague. Since handling corpses would have been extremely stupid at the time, scientists decided to run a little investigation into the matter. Their results concluded that whoever had buried the woman believed that she might have been a vampire, and placed the stone in her mouth to prevent her from snacking on plague victims. This is similar to the Polish vampire burials that were also recently uncovered, where a woman was buried with a modified sickle placed around her neck. That's so metal. Number 2. Persian chemical warfare. When 19 Roman soldiers stormed a Persian tunnel, what they were met with would change the world forever in about 2,000 years. A wall of smoke enveloped them, melting their lungs. Their bodies would be found years later, desperately clawing at their armor. What this is attributed to is an ancient chemical weapon constructed from sulfur and bitumen being thrown into a fire. The smoke was then directed up into the tunnels, where it would turn into acid once breathed in by anyone who contacted it. A starkly brutal weapon and a reminder of the horrors of war. Number 1. Incorruptibility. This strange practice is generally held as a strong belief by the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox denominations of Catholicism. The idea is that if a corpse is seen as incorruptible, they must be a saint, and the process of making a saint requires examination and bureaucracy. If judged well, the body is sealed in wax and put on display, where worshippers will gather around to view the holy figure. This practice has largely ceased in the modern era, but the bodies of saints are still on display to this day, their forms freely available for all to see. It's kind of weird.